Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm TX141, also known as Paul, welcoming you all to a brand new pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode we shall be reviewing the Nakajima Ki-43-III Otsu, also known as the Ki-43 Mark III-B. This is a Japanese army fighter, coming at a tier 3 and a battle rating of 4.3. To provide you with a brief historical overview of the Mark III variant and the sub-variant depicted here today, we must realise that the Mark III was the final variant of the Ki-43 Hayabusa, which arrived in the summer of 1944. It was rather similar to the final sub-variant of the Mark II, known as the Mark II Kai, or modified, bar a couple of items. The most important one was that the engine was switched to the 1230 horsepower Nakajima Ha-115 Mark II engine, which was of the air-cooled radial type, providing a boost to the plane's overall performance. Most notably, the plane's top speed was now 358 miles per hour, also known as 576 kilometers an hour, at an altitude of 6,700 meters. The plane's service ceiling was also increased to 11,400 meters due to this engine, and with the ability for the plane to now mount two 45-gallon drop tanks in the wings, a pilot could run this plane at full engine power for up to 3 hours before refuelling. The base and sole sub-variant of the Ki-43-III, known as the Ki-43-III Co or Mark III-A, was to retain the rather defunct 2x12.7mm Ho-103 machine gun armament as carried over from the Mark II variant, mounted above the engine. In total, just shy of 1,000 Ki-43-III Co's were manufactured between October 1944 and June 1945, in parallel with the now more commonplace Ki-84 fighters. Still, the Ki-43-III was enjoyed by its pilots in terms of its overall maneuverability and its ease of flight. Yet the inadequacy of the fighter in terms of its top speed, both in the dive and on the level, and its firepower by comparison with the United States contemporaries at the time, meant that this plane was always up against the odds. Plus, the fact that the Japanese Army, and indeed the Japanese Navy, were now on the back foot by the midst of 1944, meant that a number of the pilots who flew the Ki-43-III were rather inexperienced. A number of these Ki-43s then would have been used in kamikaze raids against the United States fleets in the Pacific leading up to the end of the war in the Pacific, and if we focus on the Ki-43 Mark III-B, only 2 prototypes of this aircraft were ever produced, with this plane being intended for more of an interceptor role by switching out the 2x12.7mm machine gun armament for two 20mm Ho-5 cannons with 150 rounds per gun. And this plane, if produced, would have been more prevalent in the homeland defence role that it was intended for. And so with our history out of the way, let us now take a look at how the Ki-43-III Otsu handles in War Thunder. For our first game of today, we are on the ground strike map Desert Coast using the following setup. Stealth belts for our 20mm cannons. The reasoning here is that all but one of the rounds in these belts are high explosive fragmentation incendiary rounds, with the other round being a practice shell. These high explosive rounds, when instant on a new fighter, are absolutely devastating, and the effects can be replicated against bombers through sustained fire, especially towards the cockpit or the wings. For this we have a 500-meter gun convergence, due to the fact that our armament is based above the engine in the nose, and for our fuel load we are using the standardised 30-minute fuel load to ensure that we have the fuel capacity to make it unscathed to the end of the game. We begin with a valid demonstration of the sheer power of the climb rate of the Ki-43-III Otsu, whereby this plane's climb rate, in my opinion, is superior to all those at the same battle rating and tier. We can see in the distance here we have a Spitfire Mark V-B and an I-185 M82 rushing to intercept our climb. Unfortunately, they will be able to intercept us, but the Spitfire is going to stall out underneath us as we engage into an overclimb. We climb as sharply as possible and force the Spitfire to stall out below us, but the I-185 is not going to stall out. Having maintained their energy enough, they begin to open fire. It is here that we use our low speed maneuverability to cut over the top of their line of fire and use our roll rate to evade any incoming 3x20mm cannon fire before forcing them to level out due to a lack of kinetic energy, and we can use our regained energy in our gradual dive to come around, line up our shot onto target and pick up what is going to be kill number 1. We then break around because our work is not done yet. We need to knock out that Spitfire Mark V-B in case they pose an additional threat. We have an SB-2M down below us who is trying to climb up to use their forward-facing 2x7.62mm machine gun turret to put some rounds into us, but we feel confident that our rear-facing 13mm armour plate will sustain the fire. We knock out the Spitfire, and now we begin to loop over the top of the SB-2M, as we have the superior maneuverability despite that being a rather manoeuvrable bomber in its own category. We come around and line up our first shot on their left wing, crippling their controls on that side before using a banked high turn in order to come around for our second and final burst onto target. With kill number 3 now in the bag, we level out and proceed for a reload, as with our high fire rate in combination with our low ammo capacity of 300 rounds, that means reloads are going to become a very thick and fast coincidence. As a result, to mitigate this, you can either control your fire accordingly, alternatively you can reload in between every given engagement when you have the time, or maximise your crew skill in terms of reload speed. Having reloaded, we now begin to level out and push towards an enemy Wellington and a B-25. If we were in the Ki-43-II at this point, we would not be able to engage these targets as easily, simply because we would not have the firepower, but with two 20mm cannons in the nose, we have the ability to do so. The Wellington comes towards us with an offset head-on, hoping probably to use their machine gun turrets to knock us out on the way in or on the way out. But as we're going to see, these two 20mm cannons, especially with the stealth belts, are absolutely devastating. We line up our shot and open fire, not providing enough lead until the lead indicator arrives, and that shows how careful you have to be with providing lead with the 20mm cannons. And this will be exacerbated further against this B-25J Mitchell. Look at how much lead we have to provide on top of the lead indicator. It is almost an entire plane profile, in terms of a fighter profile. As we pick up our ace in the day on the Mitchell, we snap roll to make sure their rear-facing 12.7mm machine gun turret does not hit us, as one or two hits may set us on fire and knock us out of the game. The durability of this plane is dreadful to say the least. It is highly flammable, especially around the central fuselage, and the plane's wings will come off with just one or two 20mm cannon shells or a sustained burst of machine gun fire, especially from the likes of say a P-40 Kitty Hawk or a P-47 Thunderbolt. As we level out and finish off our second reload of the game, we notice an enemy Spitfire climbing up underneath us in the distance. And as we look towards them and proceed towards them, we realise that the Spitfire has not got the energy in order to perform a head-to-head. What we are going to do is we are going to put our nose down towards them, entice them for the head-on, and then break around over the top of them, due to the fact we will be able to evade their incoming fire, as depicted here. They cannot bring their nose around, despite the fact they are in a Mark 9 with a very powerful Merlin engine. They just cannot bring their nose around in time to get the shot onto us before we cut away. It means we can use our tight turn circle on a banked rudder turn to pick up kill number 6. We come around now and we notice a P-51 in the distance and another B-25. For the time being, we're going to sustain our position at 4,500 meters altitude in order to make sure that we do not attract any more attention, but at the same time we are ready to pounce on any foes who happen to be loitering around below us or intending to climb up to engage us. As we look around, we see that an enemy Wellington has spawned in and they may be a viable target. But in the interim, we now have to discuss the energy fighter characteristics of the Ki-43-III, or Otsu version of the 3. This plane as an energy fighter is not as good as it may seem. Yes, this plane handles very well and its control surfaces are retained very nicely at higher speeds, all bar one control surface in particular, and that is its elevators. The elevators we see here as we go towards the LA-5 becomes a little bit sluggish in response, and this means that you lose the precision that you initially have with this plane at lower speeds. Here we finally land our shots onto the LA-5 to pick up kill number 7, as they seemed oblivious to our presence, and the lack of tracer meant they did not notice any tracers flying past their cockpit. Opponents who fly in a straight line when we are in high speed boom and zoom engagements are quite easy targets, as we only need to get one or two shots onto target to pick up the kill, as you have seen there. But if the LA-5 had noticed us and started banking all over the place, we would have had to have aborted, either flying past them or climbing back up, because our elevator slightly seizes up to the point where its sluggishness means that we lose the precision that we would have in lower speed engagements, and we will see that again here against the Wellington, whereby we try to snap out to the right but they go underneath us, meaning that we have to perform a direct boom and zoom attack, but we just cannot land the shots towards the central fuselage or the cockpit that we would really like to land. We lope over the top to pick up a second burst onto target, but we realise a number of friendly fighters are now engaging the Wellington and there is no point of staying here any longer. We also have to consider a number of enemy fighters have come out the spawn and are climbing. Most prominently this I-16 Type 27 Ishak, who we intend to go head to head with, as we feel that whilst the I-16 with its two 20mm cannons here is deadly, if we can get past it in the head-on, we will be able to outmanoeuvre it in the long term, with our ability to maintain maneuverability at lower speeds being superior to their own. We take a reload despite the fact we've still got 250 rounds left to make sure that we are fully prepared, and we drop our combat flap straight away. As we look up, the I-16 is banking up in a climb and will try to use their momentum to come down on us. We open fire at long distance, but we cannot achieve any hits, meaning we start to snap roll, and we just take a glancing blow from one of their 20mm cannon shells. We are lucky in this regard, but it does highlight how just a glance will damage your plane, as here our oil tank has been burst around our engine. The I-16 tries to manoeuvre in behind us, but through the use of a set of scissors and in looping over the top of them via use of a rudder turn, we can gradually pick up the advantage here in the dogfight. The I-16 is running out of energy, and as they use their landing flaps most likely, and they cut their engine in order to force us to almost overshoot, we bank up a little bit more on our rudder to ensure that we do not, and we can come around and pick up what will be our 8th and final kill for this game. We then break back up, looking towards an SM-79, but also making sure that that P-51 Mustang, with its 420mm cannons, is not making its way towards us, as if they do go for a head-on with us, we would certainly be dead. And with that game out of the way, let us take a look at some post-game stats. Keeping in mind that we are now using a premium account from here on in, our 8 kills allowed us to obtain 37,990 silver lions, along with the accretion of 2,375 research points, all going towards our continued work on the Ki-43-III Otsu. This first rather frantic game then has demonstrated 2 key strengths of the Ki-43-III Otsu success. The first one is its incredibly high climb rate, which is probably in my opinion the best climb rate for the tier and battle rating combination. We were able to overclimb a Spitfire Mark 5B straight from the start, and almost do the same to an I-185 M82 as these two planes proceeded to intercept our initial climb. If they had not interdicted us, we would have been well above 5,000 metres altitude before anyone else on the given match. Nonetheless, when we were interdicted by the I-185 M82, we used our second core strength of high maneuverability, whether we be towards our stall speed of 140 km an hour all the way up to 500 km an hour. We were able to evade their upcoming fire, using our roll rate in order to make sure none of the 20mm cannon shells hit our wings, before we cut around and knocked them out. We followed this through against a second Spitfire, and eventually our final kill on the I-16 Type 27. But in doing this we also highlighted one of the key weaknesses of this plane, and that is its very low durability combined with its high flammability. We took a glancing blow from a 20mm Shvat cannon shell off of the I-16 Type 27, and that was enough to rupture our oil tank. Imagine if that had been a direct hit on our fuselage, or indeed on our wings. We could have potentially been dead straight from the start. By using our manoeuvrability and our climb rate in equal measure, we were able to come first by comparison to the rest of our team. But we also demonstrated some inklings, or some hints at the fact that this plane can become a bomber hunter thanks to its 2x20mm cannon armament in the nose, and the sufficient ammunition to do so, despite the rather low ammo count of 300 rounds in total. We were able to dispatch a Wellington and a B-25J Mitchell very quickly, and we also exploited this plane in the boom and zoom capacity, where, albeit a very limited and linear one, against an unsuspecting LA-5. But we could accredit this to both their lack of observational awareness and also the lack of tracers in our stealth belts. We will now carry through this energy fighter concept and this bomber hunter concept into our second and final game for today. We now move to the ground strike map Top of the World. And using the same setup as before, this game is going to be a more typical representation of the games I've experienced in the Ki-43-III Otsu on a day-by-day basis. Most of these games have been centred around energy fighting, bomber hunting, and the occasional turn fight when an opponent is able to get up to the same altitude level as myself, or when they have pursued me following a boom and zoom pass down at lower altitudes. We straight away go for our extended climb, and we highlight here how in a battle rating 5.0 plus game, as we see a Spitfire Mark 5C below us and a Messerschmitt 19G2 behind us, how we are able to climb with, if not outclimb, everything else on our team that is trying to go for higher altitudes. What does this mean in terms of higher tier matches then? Well, your climb rate is comparable to that of say a Focke 190 D9 up to altitudes of at least 5,000 metres. And this enables you to catch a lot of opponents who feel that they are the better energy fighters of their tier and battle rating by surprise. And this also means that if you see a B-17 up at an altitude of 8,000 metres or so over the course of a game on a map such as Paradise Island or Pacific Hidden Base, you will be able to pursue those bombers down very quickly. And I've had a couple of instances where I've been able to chase down B-17s that have managed to get up to extreme altitudes by being able to climb up to them well before friendly Focke 190As can, or indeed climb up to them at the same rate that a Messerschmitt 19G can. Although there is a limitation on the climb rate and performance of the III Otsu, as we have highlighted earlier, and that is its performance drops away above 6,000 meters altitude in terms of its climb rate. You will need to use levelled out climbs, i.e. a small climb, then level out for acceleration up to 400 km an hour, and then climb again to ensure that you're able to proceed above 6,000 meters without the risk of stalling out. And by being able to get up to 5,000 meters very early on, we see that an enemy G5N leaves the game, and we now have two bomber targets in the form of a Yer-2 and a B-25 Mitchell. These two players continue to press along their chosen path, and this Yer-2 with its 20mm cannon, its rear turret, needs to be taken out first. We provide ample lead, killing their pilot, and then carry through on the B-25J Mitchell. Again, see here how much additional lead we have to provide on top of the lead indicator provided. In the case of the Mitchell here, it's practically half of their profile, if not 3/4 of it. And this is dangerous, because it means that unless we can get our shots on the target straight away, their gunners are going to have a nice clean shot on us, especially if we engage from an offset behind position, as we have just done. Fortunately for us, our second burst from underneath is enough to cripple their elevator and set their left wing on fire, gradually building up our second kill as they burn to death. In the meantime, as we reload once again, we continue to look around and see no threats up high in terms of enemy fighters. And this means that this game becomes a little bit more tedious as we just gradually make our way around the map up at higher altitudes and look towards the enemy bombers. We see another Yer-2 has spawned in and we proceed over to attack them, with a friendly Firefly on our team also doing the same. Yet by comparison, we have the ability to build up our speed very quickly by comparison with the Firefly, it would seem, although I have not flown it yet, and indeed build up our altitude in the same regard. Nonetheless, our friendly Firefly does well here, knocking out the Yer-2 by setting them on fire, and we follow through to engage the Heinkel 111H that has been left open to us. If the Heinkel dies, we will not pursue, but if they continue level, we will put them down. And as we go to do so, we need to talk about the acceleration of the Ki-43-III Otsu. And what is interesting is that within a speed range of 150 to 400 km an hour, the acceleration of this plane is remarkable. Not in the league of say Yakovlev Yak 3, but to the point where you can rebuild your speed very quickly, and this means that you can continue to climb up at extreme altitudes, or indeed you can pick up your speed very well. And this is also a little bit of a danger, because in those slow fights, as with the I-16 Type 27 from earlier, you may actually overshoot those who try to cut their speed on landing flaps or air brakes, so you need to be careful in this regard of the plane picking up speed too quickly. We circle over the top of a Focke 190A4, causing them to stall out and pick up another kill, just using our ability to use our tight turn circle, our rudder and our ailerons all in one go to tease the Focke 190A4 into continuing to push up towards us before they run out of energy. And this is a standard tactic which works incredibly well both in the Zeros and this fighter in particular. We level out once again and go for another reload, making sure to exploit every opportunity we have to top up our ammo capacity, and we see another Focke 190 climb up from underneath us. We intend to use the same tactic once again, lure them up, set up an offset angle where they cannot intend to fire upon us, and then as they stall out, knock them out of the game. It's another 190A. As we look down towards them, we see that they're out of energy, and they do not have the ability to put their nose down for any given reason. Perhaps they are intending to try and swing at the last moment, but we swung first and knocked them out for kill number 5 and our ace in the day. At this point we notice a B7A2 has spawned in, and with their two 20mm cannons, firing forward from the wings, we do not want to get involved here, as we only need to take one shot to be knocked out by them, by comparison with their durability being significantly higher. Instead we are going to pursue down the PE2, which is currently in an engagement with a friendly Spitfire and seems to be winning that engagement against the Spitfire, and we also have a friendly Firefly, the one from earlier, who is trying to pursue the PE2. But with our performance threshold in terms of climb rate and ability to accelerate up to 400 km an hour seemingly being higher here, we are going to use this in order to knock the PE2 out and let the Firefly engage the B7A2. We can see already how we are catching up very quickly with the PE2 as they come towards us, and the Firefly is just gradually giving pursuit. We could have turned and faced off the B7A2, but this is the more economic and efficient way of dealing with two opponents in the skies in my opinion. We break up using our climb rate, and we can see once again we provide a huge amount of lead, and the PE2 just goes straight into our line of fire and gets knocked out for kill number 6. As we begin to loop over the top, the B7A2 is now being engaged by our friendly Firefly, as we come around to try and get a shot onto them, but we can see they are diving in the presence of our Firefly coming down on them, which means the Firefly can knock them out, and I type into the Firefly player here, nice kill, because it was a very nice kill, and we worked nicely in tandem here to ensure that 2 enemy bombers could be knocked out of the sky within a very short space of time. As we push on, we've seen another enemy target up high in the distance just spawned in. We do not know what it is yet, but we're going to proceed over. And we must now continue our discussion of the acceleration zone. We can see here at 484 km an hour that the Ki-43-III Otsu, once it is above 425 km an hour in particular, its acceleration dies off. You can build this plane up to a speed of approximately 510 km an hour in level flight at an altitude of 6,000 meters or more, but this takes an excruciatingly long time, and so you do not want to let your opponents get away from you. Messerschmitt 109 G2s are a key example of this. If they are allowed to get away from you, you will not be able to catch up with them in the long run, especially if they have already started at 500 km an hour in getting away from you. The IL-4 tried to go head on and use their forward facing turret to kill us, but as they broke up, we managed to knock out their overall right wing structure, and we picked up our 7th kill. And this is one of the key ways you can defeat the Ki-43-III Otsu, and that is using boom and zoom tactics, as this plane is fast within lower speed ranges, either from 200 to 400 km an hour, but at extreme speeds in excess of 400 km an hour it will not be able to keep up in the long run. And if you combine this with its low durability, despite the fact that its 20mm cannons are mounted in the nose, you will be able to win over in those head-on boom and zoom passes, or if you just attack it from above and then zoom back up accordingly. This plane does have a superior climb rate to most, but it will not be able to build up its speed to extreme levels by comparison with some of the energy fighters it will face. And a key one for doing this, for example, would be the Typhoon Mark 1B, which is incredibly fast in a straight line by comparison with this aircraft. We are afforded once again a clean linear kill on a Yakovlev Yak-1, showing how the limited boom and zoom nature of the Ki-43-III Otsu comes into effect. Knocking them out, we picked up our 8th kill if I remember correctly, and we now look towards the P-47 premium aircraft. We want to bag this kill as they are isolated, and we are doing so by coming down in a gradual dive. We do not want to dive directly down on top of them, otherwise we will mitigate. No, my apologies, we will exacerbate our rather poor elevator controllability at high speed. Here we do come down upon them because it appears that they're actually in a very low energy state and may be crippled, meaning that we can pick up our 9th kill without them evading us. We look behind and we notice that a Focke-Wulf 190A is now pursuing us, and this time we will not be able to zoom away, and this is straight away a demonstration of the weakness that can be exploited to defeat the Ki-43-III Otsu. This plane in the straight line is by no means as fast as a good portion of its battle rating contemporaries. The Focke-Wulf 190A4 will be able to outrun this plane in the straight stretch, and indeed the Yakovlev Yak-3 in particular will be able to outrun this plane very quickly at all speeds. This means we are going to have to turn and fight against the Focke-Wulf 190A4, and with their 4 20mm cannons spread across their wings, we cannot afford to take a head-on chance. Instead we are going to cut underneath them as we cut over the ridgeline here in terms of the mountain face. The idea is we're going to cut underneath them via a tight loop, and this will enable us to get underneath their elevator response, meaning they cannot put their nose down to get a shot onto us. It is a risky tactic, but it's the only one that provides the ultimate safety. So we take our gamble straight away. Snap rolling as well to try and evade any incoming fire, and we can see it just breaks over the top of us. It's at this point that the Focke-Wulf 190A has made the mistake of trying to fight with us. It's an A5 in actuality, and it means that we can get a shot onto them and set them on fire. But let us also note here another little weakness with the Ki-43-III Otsu, and that is the precision you need when hitting targets, or predominantly enemy fighters. Unless you are able to completely line up the 2 20mm cannons in the nose, or line up your nose with the enemy plane's tail section when you are behind them, you will not be able to score shots onto target via shot spread, by comparison with that Focke-Wulf 190A5, which has its cannons spread out in the wings and therefore gets that spread over longer distances. This is an offset of all fighters with armament just in the nose by comparison in the wings. But pressing on, we go back into a sharp climb once again. We can see here how going from an altitude position of approximately 1,000 metres, we are charging already back up to 1,600 metres, and we intend to push up to approximately 3,000 metres before looping around. This puts us slightly above the enemy spawn altitude. Another means of defeating this aircraft, we have already said that the ability to outrun this plane in a straight line is prevalent. Another means of beating this aircraft then is to actually engage it directly from above, and try to force the player to actually go into a dive, because when they do so, the resistivity of their elevator control is such that it will take them some time in order to go into those turns, which they can use to try and force you to overshoot. meaning that if you do bounce one of these aircraft from above and use a plane with a high roll rate akin to this, such as a Messerschmitt 19G, so long as it does not surpass say 600 km an hour, or perhaps even the A6M3 Mod 22 with its brilliant roll rate which is held up to speeds of 750 km an hour, you can use the fact that the control surfaces of the Ki-43-III Otsu seize up at 500 km an hour plus in order to force the pilot to have to technically level out for a period of time in their heading or direction to line up a shot for you, and you can accordingly knock them out. So these are two ways of defeating this plane, either via exacerbated boom and zoom and using your straight line speed to outrun it, or by striking it from above when you manage to catch one which has dived down to lower altitudes. The only other way of defeating it is luring it back to friendly fighters and hitting it in a 2 versus 1 or more situation. And that is one of the key frustrations I have had with this plane as we go for another boom and zoom pass. That a lot of players will try to use a number of players rather than just one-on-one engagements in order to defeat this plane, and they can do so because this plane only needs to take 1 or 2 hits. And we go to do another boom and zoom pass here against the Messerschmitt 19 F2, who is completely distracted chasing after one of our friendly fighters. But our roll rate was maintained, and we can see there that our incredibly high roll rate, even at speeds in excess of 500 km an hour heading towards 600 km an hour, means we can snap onto target. And with that being said, let us take a look at our second and final set of post-game stats. This time our 11 kills allowed us to obtain 72,970 silver lions and 4,389 research points, bringing us on to our concluding question of where does this plane work best in terms of altitude and speed. Personally, I feel that despite the maneuverability of this plane being superior to any monoplane fighter it encounters at its tier and battle rating, even turning and outmanoeuvring inside an A6M0, this plane is not suited for low altitude furball fighting, simply because it cannot take the stray hits that it may encounter from enemy and friendly fighters alike. Instead, if you occupy the 3,000 to 5,000 meter altitude range and use this fighter as an interceptor as it was historically intended, you will be able to outclimb every adversary you can face, bring them down accordingly before they can set up their position as an energy fighter or a bomber interceptor, and then proceed to attack the enemy bombers with the same style of wheel, using your twin 20mm cannon armament to shred through them accordingly and being wary of your durability. If you manage to keep your speed within a range of 300 to 450 km an hour, this is ideal for level flight, but be aware of the fact the elevator does seize up in a boom and zoom pass at 500 km an hour or in excess of this, but you maintain your manoeuvrability all the way down to your stall speed of 140 km an hour, making this plane incredibly agile when in a tight pinch. And by absorbing this playstyle once again, we're able to come first by comparison to the rest of our team. Indeed, for those looking for a fighter aircraft that is as light as a feather and as heavy-handed as a hammer in terms of the damage it can deal, the Ki-43-III Otsu is the fighter for you. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Yet until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.